Here's Shed. Off the window, no. Roberts tried to get it. Shed for the win. Got it. Jamal Shed plays the hero again.
Back to pass. Donovan Smith. Smith steps up in the pocket, unloads it, throws it all the way downfield into the end zone. Tipped, and it is caught. Caught by the Cougars. Caught for a touchdown. Unbelievable. Caught by Stephon Johnson.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to Scott Holland Podcast. Back here, mid-November, football and men's basketball, largely, but not exclusively, edition of the show. Bobby, I think you truly make your bones, which I think is a metaphor for money, which we make some of, but not that much of doing this show. So we're going to earn our very small monthly amount of bones here by talking about a good basketball week. That's the nice part of it. The football game, a bit less so. If you're a Cougar fan who has been awake in the last 5 days, you are aware of how the last football game went. We're going to talk about it in full, therapeutic as that could be sometimes, nightmarish as it could be to relive parts of it. That's what we're doing, buddy. How you hanging in there?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Yeah, it's been a rough week to be a Cougar fan in terms of our athletic performance, just as an athletic department as a whole, which we'll get to. But as a regular human being, life is pretty good right now. So actually looking forward, and again, we'll talk about this later in the show, looking forward to going to watch some Cougar volleyball tomorrow night.
Nice. Yeah, no, I can't complain about anything other than the football-specific results. And again, want to also emphasize good basketball news this week. It wasn't always the case that we had this rosy of an outlook for Cougar basketball. I don't ever take it for granted that we've had the last 7 years or so.
Absolutely.
Like you and I enjoyed Cougar men's basketball when it was not the Tiffany product that it's now become under Kelvin Sampson. Quick housekeeping at the top here. Going to mention our Patreon, patreon.com/SHPAWDcast, like SH Podcast. You've never gotten more premium content than you do right now if you sign up. Appreciate those of you who've been with us, and there are a surprising number of you since the beginning, but you were never going to get more content than you do right now if you, for as little as 16 cents a day, support the work that Bobby and I do. $5 a month. If you have $5 to spare, you're getting a basketball react every episode. I've been 3 for 3 so far, and intend to go 30-something for 30-something when it's all said and done, but have certainly gone 3 for 3 with the standalone episodes about each game. As well as the weekly that we've been doing since last season of football reacts. Bobby and I were up bright and early, emphasis on early, Saturday morning to recap that not Tiffany product, to use what I referenced earlier, of a football game. You're going to get one every week of those in addition to this episode that you're always going to get here for free with Bobby and I recapping the week that was. But if you want a little bit more than that, we're offering it to you. Patreon.com/SH Podcast. And of course, support our friends, our network partners at the 1012 Network, TEN12 Network, wherever you social media, talking all things Big 12 over there. School-specific podcasts like us here at Scott and Holland Podcast, as well as the 1012 pod talking all things Big 12. I think that's all the housekeeping, Bobby. We got a lot to talk about. We'll start with the good news first because, as we've kind of alluded to a few times, it's not as plentiful. We're gonna have the nice part first, and then we're gonna really get down to the muck of some of the not so great results from the past week or so. But kick it off with, I think, some very positive off-court news. It takes pretty big news for non-on-court results to lead for us, but Kingston Flemings, his commitment to Cougar men's basketball, it's that level of news. The Cougs, as I just alluded to, add their third commitment to the 2025 class on Thursday afternoon. Consensus, top 25 national recruit, and top 2, I think I've seen everywhere, state of Texas recruit. Point guard Kingston Flemings at San Antonio, committed to the Cougars on a 247 Sports live video. Played for Brennan High School in San Antonio, is the top point guard in the country by On3, top 3 for nearly every other service at the position. Had offers from basically every big program nationally, in Texas, regionally. U of H and Texas Tech were the finalists. A guy right at the 4-star, 5-star kind of cut line in the 2025 class could absolutely be a 5-star when it's all said and done. I think that covers all the surface level details, Bobby. What do you like about the newest future Cougar men's basketball player?
Yeah, 24/7 composite has him at a 5-star. 247 has him at a 4-star right there, as you said, on the border of the border of a 5-star. Everything I heard is that he was the best defending point guard in the country from a lot of people, that he just D's up, and that's probably his biggest talent. And I don't know if you know this, Sam, but if there's one thing you better know how to do if you want to play for a Kelvin Sampson team, it is play defense.
Interesting. Well, just learning about this.
Yes. Defense very big for Coach Sampson. So it's hard not to it's hard not to look past that. It's hard not to get excited about that. And whenever you have a guy coming in, a freshman, the biggest thing that you look for, there are some things that you just can't really teach, right? They always say height and speed. You can kind of train speed, but height and kind of quickness and athleticism is things that you kind of can't train. You need to kind of hone it in a little bit and get it better, but pure athleticism you can't really teach. And everything you read about him is just he's athletic. He's 6'3", he's athletic. The one thing that I see anyone talks about in terms of a negative with him, as much of a negative as you can have with a consensus 4 or 5 star, is his shooting. He shoots well, but maybe the mechanics could use some work and things like that. So gonna be good to know that even if he comes in like that, there's still something, if we see him early and we're like, oh man, this kid's good, he's going to get better, which is really exciting. So that was some of the things that kind of caught my eye, just kind of reading about him. Look, I'm not going to be able to tell you watching tape like, oh, this guy is, like, I watched him on tape, his highlight videos, and you're always going to see good plays on the highlight videos, but you just kind of watch it and you go, oh, he's the best player on the court. And for me, that's what I always look at. And as U of H fans, I know we always like to talk about how our football team, you don't need 5 stars. You can win with 3 stars and 4 stars. Sure doesn't hurt to have 4 and 5 stars. Sure doesn't hurt to have those 5-star guys, those blue chip guys, the number 18 recruit in the country. It really doesn't hurt to have those guys.
No doubt. Like, obviously, you expect Flemings and his fellow blue chip recruit, Isaiah Harwell, who officially signed this week, committed a couple months ago. You expect those guys to improve in the program, but the fact that you're getting him at this starting point, like Jamal Shead, by the time he finished his career, fantastic player, a one-of-one Cougar men's basketball player. That's a lot to say because there have been a lot of very, very good players, past and present, that have come through this program. Jamal Shead, his freshman year, as Kelvin Sampson loves to tell the story, was unplayable. Isaiah Harwell and Kingston Flemings will not be unplayable from day one. Really, really excited. I saw the same, thing that you saw, that shooting might be the weakness there, but incredible athlete, as energetic and willing and a leader on the defensive end of the floor as the offensive end, which is, I think, almost kind of a prerequisite if you want to be a high level team. That, your point guard of the future, I think, has to have that, but seems to have that in spades. What I'm really curious about is how Flemings is going to have an effect on the pace U of H plays at, U of H's tempo. This has generally been a pretty deliberate team under Kelvin Sampson. How does that change with Flemings and Isaiah Harwell coming to the team? Not to mention, you have Mercy Miller's continued development, Emmanuel Sharp becoming your go-to veteran scoring guy in your starting 5 next year, with LJ Cryer and Jawan Roberts graduating. Don't know, obviously, what next year's roster is going to look like, but I think Flemings getting to learn the college game while spelling Milos Uzan, I think that's going to be a fantastic 1-2 at the point guard position. I would go so far as to say, if Uzan develops like he's kind of flashed this season, I think it's going to be maybe the best one, or one of the best, I say the best, I think one of the best 1-2s at the position in the country. And reading that 247 Sports eval of Fleming by Adam Finkelstein, what really stood out to me was one line from it. Kind of to what I said earlier about defense, music to my ears, tells you this guy's a fit for this program. Quote, he's typically competitive and has terrific hands on that end of the floor, referring to defense, and generate a lot of steals. I think this guy's going to fit in pretty good here, Bobby.
Yeah, I think that's going to work out just fine for the Cougs.
Quick shout out to my very longtime friend and fellow Coug, Matt, who was overseas on a work trip and watched this commitment live with the rest of us stateside at 10 p.m. Sweden time. So I think he's listening.
Nice.
To you, buddy. On that one, Bobby, shall we get to the on-court action for Cougar men's basketball?
Let's go.
Cougs beat UL-Lafeyette 91-45 last week at the Fertitta Center last Wednesday. The fact that U of H had something of a slow start in this one, you were down 5-3 at the game's first media timeout, down 10-6 shortly after that, makes the 46-point final margin even crazier. Never really had any doubt about the final outcome of this game, even with that slow start, but just how decisive it ended up being, I think, is pretty newsworthy. KenPom had this 23-24 point projected Cougar win. Vegas had it close to 30, 31 points, and the Cougs ended up blowing by that margin. Was all said and done, even with the slow start. Bobby, what did you see it from Wednesday night against the Raging Cajuns that you think is worth discussing?
Yeah, good bounce back game for the Cougs. That was kind of the first thing that I noticed was like, okay, you took a hard fought game, but then you kind of just look at the minutes played, and you see this. One of the big critiques out of that game was what we need to get Arsenault and Mercy Miller more involved. We need them in this game a whole lot more. Careful what you ask for, right? No. Arsenault plays 24. Mercy Miller plays 21. They played more than any of the starters except for Milo Suzan. Milo Suzan plays 21. But the Cougs they play exactly how you want to come back after a hard-fought loss. I don't know if you noticed this because I didn't notice it till I went back in the stats. No one for UL-La scored double-digit points.
That was one of the first things that stood out to me. Because I looked at the box score decent. Because I will admit, the last 5 minutes of this game, I was not in front of my TV. I did do a total rewatch before I did my premium pod. That was the first thing when I popped open the final box score. I was just like, nobody even got to. I think 8 was I think 8 was the highest any of them got to, which is just crazy. Yeah.
Team high 8. They had 3 at 7, 1 at 6. Like, do you know how good you have to play to keep a team at Division I basketball to keep them under 10 points? Kind of a concern here. And it's tough to be overly negative when you win by double and you win by 46. Terrence Arsenault, 14 points. You get kind of excited about that. But then you see he does it on 4 of 14 shooting, 2 of 8 from 3. Real Carmelo Anthony numbers there, where you put up a good amount of points, but you aren't very efficient. You want to be maybe a little bit more efficient there.
A lot of that was also in the second half when it was like your starters were out and you're all right, let's get his shot going, Yeah,
absolutely. So again, it's all with a caveat, not trying to be too bad or too negative about it. But that is something, you pull it up and you're like, I'd like to see Arsenault shoot a little bit better than that. But overall, just a great game. One of my favorite moments in this game really reminded me of a moment. And I'm sorry, I'm going to tell this story on the pod, Sam, but there are about 4 people listening who know this story about 100 times. But
Jeremiah
Evans,
were there, yeah.
Yes, Jeremiah Evans comes into the game. And he puts in one of the best Sam-like performances I've ever seen. And what I mean by this, when we were younger and we played intramurals in basketball, we were awful. Kukru, we were all in Kukru. We were terrible. We won 0 games in any intramural sports.
Dodgeball. We were good at dodgeball.
Except for one dodgeball game.
I thought we won multiple.
No, we won one dodgeball game. We won.
I think it was against
some of the smaller
Proctor.
games.
I think it was against like the Casa Proctors too.
Yeah. And so, but we played, we had fun, and we went out there. And one of my favorite moments in my entire college life was we go down, we're on defense, and my wonderful, beautiful co-host gets a foul. Okay. So he's got a foul. Guy goes to the line, makes the first one, misses the second free throw. And Sam, once again, fouls. No time had come off the clock. So it reads, foul Sam at like 10:46. And then it goes, free throw missed, or free throw made, free throw missed, 10:46, foul on Sam. 2 fouls, 0 seconds. One of my favorite moments in my college life.
I think it was like 4 fouls in like 8 minutes or so total.
It was amazing. Yeah. You may have fouled out with it like in under 10 minutes. It was incredible. But Jeremiah Evans comes in, gets a foul with 11:04 on the clock, then gets his second foul. There's nothing on the score sheet between these 10 seconds. Gets another foul at 10:54. Then 2 3-pointers are made. I think Uzan makes one and then they make one. Come back down the court. At 10:14, he gets his 3rd foul. So in less than a minute, he picked up 3 fouls. One of the most impressive things you will ever see on a basketball court. I've seen some crazy athletic feats. 3 fouls in under a minute, 2 in 0 seconds. They're up there for the most impressive things I've ever seen. And that was like my big takeaway from this game was Jeremiah Evans getting 3 fouls in under a minute. And you're just like, how do you even do that? Like,
Not
if
even
you just stand there, you don't pick up a foul. Like, you can't pick up a foul in 3 fouls in a minute just by standing on the court. You can't do it.
we name checked him the preview. I think I name checked him as a freshman who's getting extended minutes because their preseason all conference big men got hurt in the preseason. Truly,
and I think you even pointed out that he fouled out.
Yeah, truly a trial by fire to be a freshman going out against this Cougar front court and J1 Roberts, more specifically, still committing 3 fouls in that short of a stretch of time. Not even top 2 of the most brain dead things that the Raging Cajuns did in the first half of this game. You saw them kind of lose their composure at points in that first half, and 2 other situations besides the one Bobby laid out come to mind. You had Karan Davis, the UL swingman in Louisville transfer. He had a jumper to cut U of H's lead to 22-15. Does the 2 small hand motion that Wani Roberts likes to do. You kind of hold your palm flat near the ground. Apparently, from what I was able to make from the broadcast, was told to stop yapping because he kept yapping after that 2 different times by the officials before getting hit with a tech. And you see afterwards the head referee kind of explaining it to Bob Marlin, and just the look of the UL coach, the look of exasperation on his face, just being like, "You idiot!" Like he's the eyes closed and just kind of like holding his face like up to the heavens, like this
Quit
idiot.
taunting this team that is
Quit taunting this team
beat us by 100.
Yeah. And U of H got 2 free points from Mercy Miller free throws in the ball after that. About 4 minutes later, Wani Roberts gets the steal and breakaway. Kentrell Garnett hard fouls him, gets correctly called a flagrant upon review. Roberts makes both free throws. U of H gets the bonus possession where Emmanuel Sharp makes a shot to go up 34-20. That whole exchange is the exact kind of thing you want to see when U of H plays the way they play and makes an opponent lose their composure like you saw the Cajuns do in the first half. Love that we got the Stars playing the absolute minimum amount of minutes. Not that we're in a really compact part of the schedule right now, but there's going to be an over 1 week layoff between this one and the game we're going to talk about next, Hofstra. But you're also about to get to the really busy portion of the schedule on Thanksgiving week. You have the Players Era event in Vegas, of course. Later in the season, you get the volume and difficulty of Big 12 basketball. I think the only possible negative there is that you want to get Javier Francis back in game shape, and you haven't had a whole lot of games to do it, but pretty loose negative there. I thought Ramon Walker Jr., as he often does, had the kind of game that wouldn't really catch your eye if you were just looking at the box score or maybe the highlight tape, but he subbed in right after that under 16 first media timeout where the Cougs were down, looking kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word to use this, kind of slow out of the gates. And by the time he subbed out, U of H was up 24-15. That's not all Walker. You have Mercy Miller and Miles Uzan. Those guys should both get a ton of credit with Walker. Terrence Arsenault is out there as well. I'm not just saying it's Ramon Walker Jr. here, but I'm also saying it's not a coincidence, that this Cougar team, when they really needed a better level of energy, a shot in the arm, that you got it from Walker in this one. My one complaint, I thought you were going to have the same complaint as me. And again, we use the word complaint very, very, very loosely when you're talking about a 46-point win. Don't love the Cougs made fewer than 50% of their field goals from 2-point range.
Sure.
Sharp and Cryer, I think specifically those guys need to improve their full stop. Nobody other than Milos Uzan had greater than 2 assists or more than 2 assists. Greater than's a weird kind of mathy way to say that.
I knew what you meant, though.
Yeah, no, I know. You got to get some guards who are not named Milos Uzan to get more comfortable with the ball in their hands if you want to be good enough to remain at or the top of the Big 12. Maybe this is me wish casting, Bobby. I think we might be a little bit better from the free throw line this year.
I sure hope so. I think we'll be a little bit better. I don't know if it will be substantially better, but I do agree.
I'm not saying top 50 nationally. I just want this team to be like around top 100. Like that's my expectation. Like I know Wani and Javier Francis aren't going to go 8 of 9 from the charity stripe every night, but if we can get that more often than we've got it historically, like that's another thing that makes
we can get that more often than not, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need both guys to be dead-eye free throw shooters. Just shooting the 60s from the free throw line. That can allow you to win some really tough close games in Big 12 play.
I agree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah. No real quibbles. Emphatic win. Glad, like you said, we got extended minutes from Arsenault and Mercy Miller, and everyone left this game healthy.
Yeah, that's really what you want out of these games, and I was very happy with this. Looking at it and going like, oh no, he said he wanted to really test some different rotations, and you really saw that, right? The minutes by themselves tell the story, but also you can see there were different matchups on the floor of different guys paired with different guys just to see kind of what works, and I really like that. So
Agreed. Bit tougher test coming up next at the Fertitta Center on Friday night, at least compared to your previous two non-Auburn opponents in the Hofstra Pride. Coached by Speedy Claxton, Hofstra alum, a guy who's from Long Island, where Hofstra is located, if you're not familiar. Somebody's done a pretty good job since taking over his alma mater before the 21-22 season. Was a 2003 NBA champion as Tony Parker's backup. I'm pretty sure I had a basketball card of him when he was a Spur from back in the day. Led Hofstra to the NCAA tournament under future longtime Villanova head coach Jay Wright as well. His first game in charge, if you'll remember this one, Bobby, was actually that hard-in-mouth season opener from the 21-22 season. We went to overtime with them. That was his very first game at Hofstra. Ended up being a pretty good team. I don't know if they went to I think they went to the NIT that year. Ended up being a pretty good mid-major. The Pride are 4-0 so far this season. 3 of those wins came over Division I opponents. They have wins over Seton Hall and UMass. Neither of whom look like they're going to be especially good, but those are two names, if you're a team of Hofstra's profile in that part of the country, that are always nice wins to get. They were predicted to finish 4th out of 14 in the CAA preseason poll, which seems kind of surprisingly low because they've been pretty consistently good the 3 years that Claxton's been there, but makes more sense. They didn't have any preseason all-conference guys either, but also a majority of their roster weren't here a year ago. Their top 4 scorers were all guys who were at different programs a year ago. What also, really quick, shout out Hofstra's website for actually having a pronunciation guide for all their players. Like, 2 episodes ago, we're like looking at JP Pegues on Auburn. We're like trying, is it Pegues? Is it Pegues? Yeah. And I had literally had to go watch a YouTube transfer video to actually get the guy's name. Shout out to Hofstra for actually having a pronunciation guide for everyone in their roster, even like Michael Smith, and it's like MY. I'm like, okay, like, we know it, but appreciate you, Hofstra. Their top 4 guys. What?
No, that's just when you're like, thanks though. We do appreciate that.
It is like the thought counts. Gene Arengaren, Cruz Davis, Jaquan Sanders, and Michael Graham, all guys who were playing at different programs, but all kind of around Hofstra's part of the country, that northeast corridor there. The first 3 guys who I mentioned are all shooting very well from 3-point range. I think they're going to be a better team than 4th in their conference, but I also get why if it's a mostly new roster, it's hard to kind of project that. If you're doing a preseason thing, Bobby, what have you learned about Hofstra?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on the 3 guys. Those 3 guys right there are going to lead this team. 3 guards that can all put the ball in the bucket. You see Hofstra and you go, maybe this team, we should blow them out. And you kind of hope that. But this team did go into Seton Hall and get the W there. Not that Seton Hall is like... Was it Seton Hall? Yeah. Sorry. I don't know why I just was like, was it actually Seton Hall? No. But you go in, you see Seton Hall, and they came away with a win. Seton Hall, maybe not as good as you think Seton Hall is, but still tough to go into a Big East arena and come away with a win, 49-48. Those 3 guards are going to lead them. They're all averaging double digits, the 3 that you mentioned. So maybe not as easy of a walkover game as you might think going into it. This team could give you some fits. I think the 3 guards, and I think I saw they have 5 guards that have played all 4 games. So you're going to get a real test of our guards and our depth and our guard play. So super excited to see how the Cougs handle this.
I think when it gets to an opponent the level of Hofstra, I try to look at, because with UL-La and Jackson State to differing degrees, you think you just look to those opponents like, yeah, it's not going to happen. Like, it's going to be a Cougar win by pretty wide margin. Hofstra, I think, at least clears the bar of, okay, how could they possibly get the upset here? And you look at actually their weaknesses, and I think that's where it gets harder to map this out, because their weaknesses line up pretty neatly with what is just a perennial U of H strength. They're 284th nationally in turnover percentage, which not really surprising. Mostly new guys on the roster. U of H is always very good, including this year at turning opponents over. Their biggest defensive weakness has been keeping opponents from making threes, and U of H has shot well from deep. Granted, 2 of the 3 games this year against not that great opponents, but on the flip side, their biggest offensive strength is shooting the 3. U of H has done a much better job on the perimeter than the interior, though I think Auburn is skewing that number a bit. And one more, they have not been good at keeping opponents off the glass. They're 259th nationally in opponent offensive rebounding percentage. another area where the Cougs are and generally are extremely good. Certainly a better opponent than the two teams they've already seen come to Fertitta Center, but also probably worse than the teams we're going to be seeing the Cougs test themselves against next week in Vegas.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those games that could sneak up on you if you're not careful. Hopefully the Cougs are careful.
All right, bud. Can't delay it anymore. Got to talk about that football game.
I guess we do, don't we?
I'm not going to become somebody who changes their overall or medium or long-term opinion of a head coach or a program based on one game, no matter how bad it went. But this one still went very, very poorly for the Cougs. I do think this game made the necessity of one specific change to the coaching staff pretty clear and not debatable. Whether that comes now or at the end of the season, probably end of the season, we'll get to that. This is now the third time in the current year where this football program has, in a longer Big 12 road game, almost completely no-showed. And for the second time in a row during one of these longer Big 12 road games, the Cougs faced a team coming off a long losing streak and allowed this team to pretty decisively end that losing streak. If anything, this game was worse than the one I kind of lumped it in with, referred to, the Kansas game, because even during that losing streak, Kansas was losing by close margins. I remember you and Andy, when you went on the Rock Chalk Pod, talked about that. That was probably a better team than a 1-6 record when you came in to face them.
Yep.
Credit to Arizona for getting the win. They certainly kicked the Cougs' butt and were, in any way, eye tester, statistical, a decisive winner here. I don't think that's a good football team. I don't think much differently about them now than I did beforehand. Arizona hadn't allowed fewer than 28 points in Big 12 play since September, and as we know, only allowed 3 to the Cougars on Friday. This was an opponent coming off a 56-12 loss at UCF, a thoroughly mediocre UCF team, and you barely looked like you belonged on the field, the same field as them at times this game. It's already making me stutter. It's already making me talk weird, Bobby. Where do you want to start with this one? Because I don't believe I've had a tougher week, even including some of the lowlights of the season, putting together 3 overlooked plays. So excited to hear what you have to say here. Excited to see how you found 3 plays that were meaningful from this game that might have escaped normal view.
It wasn't easy, buddy. It wasn't easy. I was really grasping for straws, especially on the third one. I was like, shit, I don't know.
Literal last thing I did in my notes, by the way. I usually do it kind of chronologically. Literal last thing I did in my Word document.
Yeah. I would say Cougs first drive, Cougs are driving, you pick up a first down. On that first down, Zeon Chris runs for a loss of 1. That, you may not think that that's a big play, but that puts you into 2nd and 11. You're kind of forcing Zeon Chris to throw there. Zeon Chris throws on 2nd down, incomplete pass. 3rd and 11, which we'll talk about that here in a minute. Run the ball because you're just trying to pick up some yardage. Maybe you flip the field position game a little bit. Burnett runs the ball, fumbles it. Arizona gets the short field, go down, score their first touchdown. So that was my first play, was that actual first down. Not picking anything up there and having to play behind the sticks really puts you in a weird, bad kind of situation there. With 9:33 left in the second quarter, I want to say, Mekhi Muse gets his punt return touchdown. Great return and called back for a hold. Maybe one that isn't as overlooked. Maybe I'm using overlooked a little.
Don't worry, I did too. You're good.
Yeah, maybe I'm using overlooked a little liberally there, but with a lot of things that happened in this game, it's easy to forget that we did have a kick return touchdown there. That was called back on a special teams penalty. Tell me if you've heard that this season. And then with 16 seconds left to go in the first half, it's not the kick, but it's the play 2 plays before the 62-yarder. Because you had the 62-yarder. The play before that was an incomplete pass where they were trying to get it closer. But the play before that's an 11-yard gain, an 11-yard pass. Remember, they got the ball with only 42 seconds left to go in the half. If you bring some pressure, you do something different there. And this has happened multiple times this year. And we saw it a lot last year where we couldn't close out games. We couldn't close out end of halves where the other team had $1:15 left to drive and they would go down and score a touchdown. Is this a little bit better? The guy's got to make a 62-yarder. Yeah, sure. But if you don't give up that 11 yards there, they're not kicking they're not kicking a 73-yarder and you go in down less than you were. Instead of being 10-3, you're down 7-3. And it doesn't make a huge difference in the game, but the game felt different going in down a full touchdown versus down 4. So those were my 3. It's like we said, it was really tough to find 3 today or this week. But Sam, what were your 3?
I took the definition a little liberally this week as well, because finding 3 significant plays in a game that you only scored 3 points is hard. My first play is where I think I stretch it the most, but I do think it got somewhat buried from all the bad stuff that happened afterwards. It's not one that I saw a lot of people talking about in the postgame. It's the Jamarian Burnett fumble on that first U of H possession.
Yep.
I'm not going to go so far as saying U of H wins this game if that play goes differently, but you have Burnett in that situation at or extremely close to first down yards before he coughed up the ball. I really
he was probably about a yard short.
Yeah, I think that was the official spot, and that kind of lines up with what I saw when I watched it. I really do think if U of H hadn't given Arizona the ball there in favorable position and had gotten some kind of score out of this drive, whether it's a field goal or touchdown, I don't think it's a Cougar win. I think it would have at least been a different kind of Cougar loss compared to the one that we actually got. This is a team that really feeds off early successes, and I think if this first drive finished with at least a field goal, I think the remaining 3.5 quarters go a little differently. How differently? Hard to say, but I don't know if it's a 27-3 loss. If nothing else, you banked 3 more points than you probably got, because it felt like you had some early momentum there, and like was kind of the story of this game, did something to shoot yourself in the foot and sabotage any positive things you were doing. For my second play, I picked the play immediately before the now infamous Donovan Smith shotgun run from inside the 1-yard line, because the play before that was its own missed opportunity. On first and goal, you had a really nice 8-yard Rashawn Sanford run. The play that I'm referring to is the second and goal play from the 2 that I think with hindsight, you look back on it, that would have been the really perfect opportunity on a drive where you're really gashing their front. You were mostly running the ball because running the ball was working really well, better than it did, I think, at any other point in this game. I feel like running a hot pass or some other fake to a pass where you're really getting them to sell out to the run, I think gets you a touchdown in that situation. I know.
Or even that 4th down call that you ended up making. If you run that play on 2nd down there. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it has a better chance of working there because you've been just running it, and you've been so successful. You really have them thinking run and afraid, they're going to pound us for these 2 yards to the touchdown. Instead, you have, I think, a pretty, and I know that had been working, but a pretty uncreative Zion Chris run. Did gain 1.5 yards or so. Did put you in what should have been a good position to score. I just feel like that was kind of a missed opportunity to get a little more creative, which this offense has teased you enough over the season to do, but at key moments just hasn't happened, and set them up nicely. And then you had 2 harebrained attempts to score on 3rd and 4th down unsuccessfully. For my 3rd and final play, I will admit, Bobby, I'm picking this one largely a rail against what I think was a really shitty call by this game's officials. This was the fake punt U of H ran with your backup quarterback, Holman Edwards, in the 3rd quarter, down 17-3. This entire play occurred at midfield, and U of H's was lined up towards my side of the field. So I had as good of a view of that play as about any play I saw on Friday night in Tucson. It was called an incomplete pass on the field, even though it very much looked like Stephon Johnson got his arms under the ball for the catch. Immediately after the play, I could tell you Johnson went over to Willie Fritz and gestures just adamantly, I caught the ball. What really, really hacks me off about this play, and I don't know if this was something clear if you were watching at home, they set up the little, booth viewfinder thing right in front of my section with the head referee. That referee, Bobby, was not there for more than 20 seconds before announcing that the call on the field stood. I don't know. I think they went to commercial break afterwards.
Yeah.
It was the quickest review I have seen in my. I have seen crews look at obvious plays for 2-3 minutes. That ref was no more than 40 feet away from me, dead on.
Wow.
They go there, look at it, couldn't have been more than 2 times, gets up, says, after further review, the call stands. And I don't know if I've ever seen a shorter review. And to say the call stands implies that to some extent that you took an extended look at the play and couldn't find anything to overturn it. And maybe it truly was the case that there weren't any good camera angles that could have shown
they
there was a
didn't show
catch.
them on TV if there was.
Yeah, maybe not. I just don't know how you could get there in that incredibly small amount of time. Did this play really change the outcome of this game? Probably not, but I mean, if this gets called correctly, in my opinion, you could tell me if you saw something watching it at home that made it look like it obviously bounced. I was looking at it good. I thought he got.
Texted you. I thought I texted you and said that's absolutely a catch.
You did, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if you saw a review and said, "Oh, hey, like it actually looked differently."
No,
I mean
that was absolutely a catch in my opinion.
So you're still down 17-3, even if it gets called, in my opinion, correctly. But you go from giving the ball to Arizona at midfield, down 17-3, to potentially having a chance to cut it to one score. A lot of things from this game lead me to believe that probably wouldn't have changed the final outcome, but just felt like I'm not going to blame the refs in this one. U of H lost this one the old-fashioned way, even though I didn't like the Muse call, and I really didn't like this call. So just wanted to use that as my chance to get on my soapbox and rail against this call that I feel for once in my life I was actually there with a good view of it and just don't and feel like at least somewhat qualified to say like, hey, this was not called correctly. So those are my 3 plays. I think we should probably rip the Band-Aid and talk about the thing that went the worst from this one, the offense, if you're good with that, Bobby.
Yep, let's do it.
Man, and we've already kind of talked about it. As much as I have a physical revulsion to talk about this play, that failure to score from inside the 1, a play that I got to see up close because the seats I had for this game were 1 or 2 sections over from that end zone. Oh, man. I mean, you were only down 7-0 at that point when you didn't successfully convert. And I'm not quibbling with the decision to go for it there. Even though we've been very, very bad at getting touchdowns out of these situations, you want to be the kind of program that goes for it in that situation. You want to be the kind of team that eventually, doesn't always fuck these up. That's not what I quibble with. The 2 play calls on 3rd and 4th down were indefensible. 3rd down the most, but I mean, it cannot be said enough. Putting Donovan Smith in the shotgun, sorry for being loud there, to run on 3rd and goal inside the 1-yard line is one of the worst pieces of coaching malpractice you will ever see. And I also think, by the way, putting Donovan Smith in period in any situation where it's not because Zeon Chris has to leave the game injured or the game is out of hand, that itself is bad process. He's a great kid from all accounts. But Smith lost the job because he wasn't playing quarterback well. Don't pull your sophomore quarterback you ostensibly want to build around for the future because you want to give the 5th-year senior a chance to score a touchdown. Good programs don't do that shit. Point blank. Sorry if that seems harsh. Donovan Smith has been a terrible quarterback most of about 2 seasons at this school. Zeon Chris has shown not that much, but probably a higher ceiling this season, certainly, than Smith. Don't pull your starting quarterback for gadget formations. Good teams don't do that shit. Bobby, before I let this snowball and get myself angrier, what did you see from the offense? How did we end up at this really bad performance?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. When you were at the game and when we had that 3rd and goal, you were pissed off that Donovan Smith was in period. And I was like, I can at least justify that. You have the big guy go in and he runs it up and you tush push him and he gets in. Like, I can understand how it works. And I told you, the mind-blowing part is putting him in shotgun. I don't get it. If you're going to put him in shotgun, run him to the outside. Like, run some kind of option play, something like that. But actually, they did. But Donovan Smith made the wrong read. And I've said he's done that all season. But it's just, why is he in shotgun there? He's got to, even if you're going to put him in shotgun, which you shouldn't, that's got to be to the outside, right? You got to move it to the outside, or you got to run some kind of play action with Donovan Smith there. Because why else would you bring Donovan Smith in? Unless you're going to run the ball and just power your way into the end zone. So everyone knew the run was coming. And guess what happened? The run was stopped. Looking at the offense as a whole, it was just a bad performance. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. Can you say there was a single part of this offense that was good, a unit on this offense that was good on Saturday? The O-line, awful.
Friday, but yeah. I mean,
yeah,
occasional run, big run. Like Rashawn Sanford had a nice
Yeah.
run. Stephon Johnson, I thought when he actually got the ball in a decent spot, which couple times he probably saw his life flash before his eyes from some of those Zion Chris
Yeah.
throws. But Stephon
But
Johnson, I think, takes no blame.
As a unit, you'd be like, no, not really. O-line was bad. Zion wasn't great. The running backs, mid. The
Two
wide
fumbles,
receivers, what's that?
I was at 2 fumbles to back up.
Two fumbles, yeah. Wide receivers, decent, I guess. You had a couple of good plays by Manjack and Stephon Johnson, but overall, meh. You didn't see any crazy catches or anything like that where, you didn't see anybody just go out there and just make a damn play. And I know that sounds easy to say and all that, but guess what? On the other side of the field, their wide receiver just went out and made some fucking plays. Just went out and said, I'm that dude. I'm him. I'm going to go up and get the ball. And it resulted in a touchdown. You saw him make one of the most spectacular catches that wasn't a catch that I've ever seen in my life. And I could even make the argument that it was a catch. That thing was incredible to catch that ball. And so, I mean, like, what did this offense do? Play calling, not great. I'm not somebody who loves to hear people talk all the time. Well, quit running it up the middle. No, I understand the concept. You run it up the middle and you're establishing a game and then you can do other things based off that. I understand that. But it wasn't working. The O-line was getting no push. The O-line was getting beat on pass rush. It was just, I think there was one time where I sent it to you and there were 4 guys chasing Zion Chris on a pass. 4 guys. Immediately. There are 4 guys and Zion Chris is running for his life. It's bad. It's bad. And the one thing I want to talk about, just one more quick thing. I texted you this, you and our former host Dustin. I texted y'all this and I said, besides the 3rd and goal, what do you think our longest 3rd down was? And you guys were, or our shortest 3rd down was. And you guys were like, oh, and there was like a 3rd and 2, I think. And you guys were like,
I said 5 or 6.
Yeah, 5 or 6. And it was like, yeah, it's 6. 3rd and 6 was our shortest. So I did the math. I calculated all of the 4th downs except for the fake punt. I didn't count that one. I don't know why. I just decided not to. I did the math. My math, on 16 attempts, we averaged. Sam, what do you think the average was when you include that? When you don't include the 4th down, this is all the 3rd and 4th downs. And don't forget, we did have a 3rd and 18 late in the game. So that skews it a little bit.
The 3rd and 18 was actually the last play I watched in person before I'll fully admit, made my way for the exits on this. So you're asking the average distance total.
Yep.
8.5.
7.2. Sam, you can't win
That's
many
still
football
terrible.
games. You can't win football games going 3rd and 7 on average. Sam, I think if I am correct, hold on, let me see something here. I just got to double check this real quick. I am fairly certain that we had more 3rd down attempts than we had 1st downs in the game. We had 14 1st downs and we had 17 3rd and 4th down attempts.
Not great.
It's not good, man. It's not good. I'm sorry. Arizona had 20 1st downs. They had 3rd and 4th downs. They had 18, but they converted 10 of 17 of them. They had more 1st downs than they had attempts on 3rd and 4th down. And they converted 10 of 17 3rd downs. 10 of 18 3rd and 4th downs. What are we doing? Like, you cannot have a good offense if you're picking up 1.5 yards per play to start off your drives. If it's 7.2 on 3rd down, that's about 7 yards. That means you're picking up 1 yard and 2 yards on 2nd down. You cannot win football games playing that far behind the chains like that. I've heard Coach Fritz say in a press conference, 2nd and 8 isn't a bad place to be. And I don't disagree with him. 2nd and 8's fine. You pick up another.
Do something there.
Yes, you have to do something at 2nd and 8. You can't then make it 3rd and 9. Like, I'm okay with 2nd and 8 being a a good spot to be. I understand that, especially
you're not
Willie
behind the
Fritz and his
sticks.
offense. You're not necessarily behind the sticks. Would you like it to be 2nd and 7, 2nd and 6? Yeah, sure. But, it gives you an opportunity to pick up 4 or 5 there, and you're still in a good spot. 3rd and 7.2, awful. There's nothing else to say.
Not many offenses could overcome that. I think this one uniquely unprepared to handle being behind the chains. As much as you've seen the occasional home run hitting ability, I think most often from Zion Chris and Rashawn Sanford in the run game, very occasionally in the pass game, not an offense remotely equipped for this. And this is one of those times where counting stats are, I think, really deceptive, because go back to a little bit better time, the win over TCU earlier this season. That was one of those ones we talked about in the post game. Like, yeah, you allowed 3 sacks, but don't think that was reflective. That was a pretty good performance from your offensive line. Don't think it was reflective of bad pass blocking. Like, they held a pocket when you needed them to hold a pocket. I was floored when I looked at the post game box score.
Yes.
And there was only 2 sacks allowed, because the pass protection was awful, as bad as it's ever been by this Cougar offensive line this season. Like, the amount of times Zion Chris ran for his life, probably threw an interception as a result of running for his life, although you don't want to absolve him of all the bad decision making there. Really poor performance from your offensive line. You did very occasionally run the ball well in this one, but I don't think you could rate the run blocking good as well. This offense has been kind of maddening this year and continues to do that. Sometimes it feels like your play caller, Kevin Barbay, forgets that the running backs exist. Like Rashawn Sanford had 7 carries. I cribbed this from our friend Ryan at GoCougs.com and now Coug fans. Rashawn Sanford started this game, Bobby, 7 carries for 72 yards, and then only got 3 more carries. And I think that stat partially came up because you pointed out correctly that a lot of those 72 came on 1 carry, 30-something, but still weird he didn't get more touches. And that's not the first time we're talking about in this show that, hey, why did the offense forget about this guy? I'm not advocating for Rashawn Sanford to get 35, 40 carries here, and he was involved in the pass game, so I'm not going to say he was criminally underused here, but 10 carries is probably a little too few. This offense, this performance kind of felt like a more extreme version of the shutout against Cincy, because you move the ball well at times. Not a great offensive performance, but like you had 300-something total yards. If you saw the total yards in the box score and had no other information, I don't think you'd immediately jump to, oh, this offense got held to 3 points, but this offense just fucking grinds to a halt once they get even in the vicinity of the red zone. I would say,
yeah, it's not even like they hit the 20
really.
and they stall, but yeah, it's like the 30.
Yeah, it's not good. And the challenge is always going to get harder when the field shrinks down a bit, but the fact that
good offenses don't let that affect them.
Good offenses don't let that affect them, and I think that can't be anything other than a negative reflection on your offensive coordinator, that you get so much worse when the challenge gets harder, right?
Yeah.
And I don't expect, we should just cut to the chase, because I don't expect this will happen in season, because there are 2 games left, and it's hardly a fair audition time for any fill-in. There's no real reason to bring Kevin Barbay back as offensive coordinator, right?
Dude, I told you to tarmac him. I told you to tarmac him.
But even just...
I don't say that about many coaches.
No.
I'm never like... If he would have not been on the plane back, I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense.
There's just no real reason to do it. He wasn't the first choice for the job. That was former Tulane offensive coordinator Slade Nagel, who ended up deciding to go be LSU's tight ends coach instead. It's not like he's an ace recruiter or somebody with enough of a track record coordinating great offenses where you could say, okay, but he's been good everywhere but here. This is probably a personnel problem. Not really. He's had some good offenses. He's had more bad ones recently.
Yep.
And there's nothing to the fact that, you can at least partially dismiss this season as a reflection of Barbay not having great players to work with in order to have a functional offense. And I hope Cougar fans realize that there is a ceiling, a pretty hard one, to what this offense can achieve with this group of players. That ceiling is still pretty low. I still think that ceiling should be a whole lot higher than, Bobby, what do you think we are right now of 134 Division I FBS teams in points per game? 134.
Points per game?
Where do you think we're at?
We got to be like 132, if I would say at the highest, like 125.
Extremely close. We were tied for 130th with 14 points per game among all Division I FBS.
Well, you have a 3, 2 zeros, and a 7.
A 7 that should have been a 0, for being honest. I think, unfortunately, this probably also extends to Cougar O-line coach Iman Nagavi, who hasn't overseen a good line or anything close to it either of his 2 seasons at U of H. Probably not as much of a priority as making the change at OC, but at some point, part of being a well-compensated college position coach means getting the blame when it's not 100% your fault. At some point, the results speak for themselves. The results with this offensive line have mostly been terrible. You've had 4 performances this year where the Cougars were either shut out or spiritually shut out, the UNLV game, or in this case, a field goal away. Not great. And most of the struggles, I think, were concentrated in that third quarter. I mean, you can't quibble with too much the first half. You allowed 1 touchdown drive on their second possession where they already had pretty favorable field position off that Burnett fumble. You had the longest field goal in Arizona history to close the second quarter. But I mean, you allowed 1 touchdown drive and forced 4 punts and a turnover on downs, which was their failed field goal attempt in the second quarter. Good work in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
And a quick aside here, even though U of H was by no means out of this game when Tyler Loop had that 62-yard field goal to put him up 10-3, in real time, I could tell you, it felt like a big vibe shift between the sidelines. After he hits that, the Arizona sideline is going crazy. They're mobbing him. The crowd is as loud as it, I think, even including the touchdowns, that was as loud as I heard the crowd in Tucson the entire night. I really do think if Loop misses that one or they mess up the snap like they did in the previous attempt, you see, I think U of H go into the locker room with better energy than their opponents. And I'm not saying this game is a for sure Cougar win. I've said this a few different times. Not saying it's a for sure Cougar win if it all goes differently, but it got the crowd going as much as any good play. And more importantly, the third quarter was a disaster. One of the worst quarters this defense has had in the current season. And I will admit, one of those scoring drives was from that inexcusable Zion Chris pick where he was under pressure and just threw it up for grabs. One of the worst decisions I've seen him make. One of the worst decisions I've seen a U of H quarterback make, period. But the way Arizona moved the ball in that opening possession to go up 2 scores, I don't think I've seen this defense this season look that poor and that unorganized defending the pass. Arizona looked like they kind of realized they didn't really need to run the ball other than just as a change of pace. And once they did that, they really started dicing the Cougar defense up. Not that the game wasn't already well in hand by this point, but that Quali Conley 50-yard run, that's when you saw the Cougars tap out. And awful tackling on defense at that point looked demoralized. And that was really the dam breaking on that play. Kind of reminded me of that Abu Sama touchdown run in the Iowa State game that I think put them up. I think that put them up 20-0 in that one. It seemed like there were a number of plays, this is just kind of anecdotal, where the Cougars looked a half second or so late where guys needed to be. I mean, not your worst performance. To give it a letter grade, kind of a C minus when your offense was an F, but not your best either.
Yeah, definitely a poor performance, but not a failing performance in my opinion. I think I said this in the instant react, just for those of you who are like, ooh, what happens over there? I think I said this in the instant react. At some point, you just kind of give up if you're like, how demoralizing is it to watch you make a good play, you make a stand, you only give up 3, and you just sit there and you watch your offense go out there and do nothing. I think this defense had 1 bad drive the entire game, even though the score shows something a little bit differently. I think you have the short field with the Arizona player just going up making a play on the first touchdown. You have that bad drive in the second half. You have a guy make a 62-yarder and then I want to say like a 51-yarder.
Yep.
And then you have a big run that just kind of seals the deal. The game kind of felt like it was over at that point because you'd already given up, what was that, 20 at that point?
It was 20, yeah, it was 20-3 before that run, yep.
Yeah, you didn't feel like it was coming. Bad play there. It happens, but you really only saw this defense get driven on once, maybe twice on the 51-yarder.
If you'll allow me, despite the bad game, I still managed to find things to enjoy from my first in-person U of H football game this year. We'll say my Friday workday, maybe this was a sign of things to come. My Friday workday conspired against me leaving at the time I really needed to. So I got there about 7-8 minutes in the first quarter, hit some traffic in Phoenix and in between Phoenix and Tucson as well. Really beautiful drive. Like the Vegas to Tucson drive, especially on the parts just south of the Hoover Dam, kind of through northern and central Arizona. Really beautiful drive. A lot of ups and downs. Also, multiple stretches of 50 plus miles without services. But I think that remoteness kind of adds to the beauty. Stadium's fine. Some parts of it obviously a lot newer than others. Like we were right next to like the new Swedish club level kind of looking area that we could not walk through there to get to our much closer exit. So we had to do kind of like a horseshoe of the stadium to get back to the, or we got to our seats. We figured out another exit we could go out of and took a slightly less insane route to our car parked afterwards. But crowd was actually a little better than I expected for how awful their season had been going. The announce was 38,000 or so, definitely not 38,000 butts and seats, but I would say it peaked at probably high 20s, low 30s, which was better than I expected before I got there. Definitely cleared out quickly for that late kickoff time, and also the fact that I think by Tucson standards, this was a really cold night. I think it was like in the 50s when we left, so it wasn't too awful, but cold for this group of people. At the very least, also my partner's first ever U of H in-person game of any kind, and really fantastic that game didn't feature a touchdown. Don't love that, but you gotta laugh to keep from crying sometimes if you're a Cougar fan. Of course, got Whataburger on the way to the game in Phoenix. Actually had a good 5-6 minute conversation waiting on my order with a U of A fan who's like, oh, he like knows the Houston. He's like, oh, are you going to the game? Because this was in Phoenix, not Tucson. We talked about that. We talked about the basketball game. All the U of A fans were really cool to us, which you always appreciate as a visiting fan. Maybe less surprising when it's more of a hardcore crowd at the game. Don't know if you or I will get that nice of a reception at the basketball game in February, but I'm excited to trek back down there and meet you up there and watch a Cougar Hoops game that, knock on wood, can't possibly go worse than this football game went.
We said going into Kansas last year.
This is true. All right, Bobby, you want to talk about your, at least for a time in your life, your adopted hometown team, the Baylor Bears?
Yeah, we can talk about the Baylor Bears. That's fine. I guess.
Hate to give them anything. Really hate to give them anything, but one of the most improved teams in the Big 12, like it has to be said.
Yep. Yeah, they were a real big challenge. They weren't very good early in the season, but they've really embraced Sawyer Robinson, decided to kind of quit the 2 quarterback thing that they were kind of running a little earlier in the year, and have gone pretty much all in on Sawyer Robertson, and he's thrown 20 touchdowns and 4 interceptions on the season. So it's pretty crazy how your fortunes can change when your quarterback throws 20 touchdowns and has 4 interceptions. That's a pretty good indicator. They've won 4 straight, I believe. It may be 5. I can't count. Sometimes.
I think it's 4.
Yeah, 4 straight. The offense is clicking. Interesting though, the defense is still kind of struggling for them. They're kind of getting into some shootouts here. But now they're putting up enough they're putting up enough points to actually to compete with teams. And so I'll be honest, I'm tired of looking at teams like Baylor and going, oh man, that defense is bad. If our defense can step up and play how they have all year, and our offense can just give us what they did versus K-State or TCU, we got a real shot at winning this. I don't know what offense is going to show up. Are we going to get K-State and TCU, or are we going to get Cincy? I don't know. So it's so hard to tell you what I think this game's going to look like, because I thought last week it was going to kind of be a Cougar going out there and scoring a decent amount and hoping the defense can stop people, and it's kind of like, nope.
That's a big news this week. Dave Aranda, after their win to get them bowl eligible in 6-4, already seemed like Baylor was going this way anyway, but officially will be back as their head coach for 2025. I think has definitely earned at least one more season as their head coach. If you want a reason to talk yourself into a Houston Cougar win, and I'm certainly not saying that's the most likely outcome here, Baylor hasn't been very good defensively, despite Dave Aranda, their head coach, taking over as a defensive play caller for the first time since he's become a head coach, according to everything I've read. But the only team they've held under 30 points in Big 12 play is Oklahoma State, who has a not very good offense, better than the Cougars, but not that much. Worth noting, they still scored 28 points and accrued 433 yards against the Bears defense. They've done a pretty good job, I will say, creating negative plays and forcing turnovers, which can mask some of those deficiencies. They're pretty veteran on that side of the ball as well. 5 guys with at least 3 sacks, so they're pretty balanced. We've seen pretty much anyone with a pulse defensively be able to create pressure against this Cougar defensive front. Numbers are the numbers, though. Baylor isn't keeping too many people on their schedule from lining up the scoreboard. Unfortunately, if you listen to last week's preview pod, you heard me saying a lot of similar things about Arizona's defense, except Arizona was demonstrably worse at rushing the passer than Baylor is, and they just absolutely got after Zion Chris on Friday night. No one would confuse the game that we just watched last week as anything other than Arizona's defensive front giving the Cougar offensive line, quote unquote, the business, to use the technical term there. Even with their defensive flaws, like you, don't know which Cougar offense is going to show up here. UH's offense is still going to have to play maybe its best game, or certainly its best game since TCU, to give this team a chance to win, because, as you alluded to, their offense is really, really good. I think a little bit less of a stretch to say you could get a good performance from this Cougar defense, but you're going to need one of the best performances, maybe your best one of the season, to beat a Baylor offense that's been as good as any in the Big 12. I think the only way you can make a serious case for being better over the last month or so is Colorado. That's pretty elite company. Sawyer Robertson, who you talked about, has been really inspired at quarterback since coming on for Daquan Finn. The two stats that stand out to me the most, he's averaging just over 8 yards per pass attempt and is only averaging an interception roughly every 66 pass attempts. That tells you two things. Baylor's doing at least a decent job of getting the ball downfield in the passing game, and Robertson's not making too many mistakes. That's a hell of a combo. If you want a comparison to that number, if you're like, well, what is it, 65 or 66 attempts per interception mean? U of H's quarterbacks are throwing an INT every 19 pass attempts. And that's not even a situation where, Donovan Smith's numbers are skewing things. Zion Chris is averaging one himself every 20 and a half attempts. Not great. They have a really good two-headed running back monster, Bryson Washington and Dawson Pendergrass. Dawson Pendergrass, by the way, the most Baylor-ass sounding name ever. Feels like you went to high school with
so is Sawyer Robertson. What are you talking about?
Yeah, they really got the white Texas guy market corner there from those two fellas. But in all seriousness, like Washington, Pendergrass, really, really good. Both guys averaging over 6 yards per carry. They're underclassmen as well. Robertson isn't their first rushing option, obviously, but is definitely good enough that he needs to be accounted for as a number in the run game as their quarterback. Really, really improved offensive line. Like, they were a disaster up front in 2023. They have been drastically better at both run blocking and keeping their quarterbacks upright. I think we're both big believers in this Cougar defense, but yeah, go so far as to say what I said at the top, that this needs to be your most complete performance of 2024 to give this team and this stinky offense an opportunity to pull this upset and win this game.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for sure.
I just hope mentally the team is where they were before the K-State week, because this team has performed really terribly in games where they're expected to compete. I think Cincy, Kansas, and the last one against Arizona are pretty good examples of that, and have actually done pretty well in games where they came in as a big underdog. I think OU and K-State are the best examples of that. And guess what, Bobby? Baylor's an over touchdown favorite as we record this. Really hope the Cougars play with the chip on their shoulder. I really hope they're angry about how piss poor that effort was against Arizona, because they're going to need every bit of that to make it 2 in a row over Baylor.
Yep.
All right, Bobby, ready to make some picks and review some picks?
Let's do it, buddy.
Currently for the season, I am leading with 1391 pod bucks to Bobby's 966. I took last week the first half over of 21.5 points in the U of H first half three-way, both unsuccessfully with 40 and 20 pod bucks respectively, but was at least ever so slightly profitable because I took the game total under of 44.5 with 40 pod bucks. Bobby did oppo of me and unsuccessfully took the game total over on that 44.5, as well as U of H money line and U of H plus 1.5. We're going to try to get Bobby over 1,000 pod bucks before the end of the season. We have 2 more games to pick, but
the hell I am.
No, what do you have this week?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with, I'm going to take Baylor minus 7.5. That feels like a lot, but it again, I don't know what this offense is going to look like. And I'm going to put 75 pod bucks on that. I am going to also take the under, and I am going to put 50.5, and I am going to put 60 pod bucks on that. I was kind of changing my mind here in the middle. Actually, no. Let's put 100 on the under.
Okay.
Look. It's imaginary pod bucks. 2, sure. After this, I only got 1 game left, and 3, I'm down 400. We got to make some moves here, buddy.
Sure.
All right. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the 7.5, and then 7.5, and then I'm gonna do the under 50.5.
So as I promised last week and the week before, I'm not going to be conservative. I'm still going to keep letting it fly here. I have 3 picks for us this week. I'm putting 50 pawd bucks on the total under 50.5 points. I'm also going to hit the first half under of 25.5. I think we've got a good Cougar defensive performance. I'm not willing to go out on much more of a limb than that, but I think we're going to at least see that. I'm going to also try to do what I did a couple times successfully this year, try to make the universe see my imaginary gambling and give the Cougars at least one more conference win. I am going U of H money line plus 250 with 40 pawd bucks. Hoping Bobby, with all respect, hoping that makes the margin comical when it's all said and done. Hoping, obviously, it sends us back here talking about a Cougar football victory.
Let's go, buddy.
All right, we're going to get to Cougar volleyball, who I think I will try to do the courtesy of being pretty brief about. What was one of, I think, your toughest, if not your toughest, home weekend of the Big 12 slate. You hosted the 2 Utah Big 12 schools, both top 25, kind of locked to be in the NCAA at-large conversation kinds of programs. You lost 3-0 to Utah and 3-0 to BYU. We'll hit Utah first. Painful, and really in both games, you didn't play badly at times. Like they were like you played both. I think you played 6 sets total, lost all 6. Worth knowing that. You played these opponents pretty close in 4 of those. Just unfortunately couldn't take advantage. I think the Utah game, the most painful thing is Utah played for the game uncharacteristically sloppy in the second set, and unfortunately you played worse. I think you probably saw Utah's athleticism advantage at them having 7 blocks to the Cougs. 1 didn't really have any offensive players outside Katie Corelli, who had a really strong night, 14 kills and hitting 375. No one really outside of her gave you much offensively, and I'm not pitting this loss on Angela Grieve by any stretch, but you needed both Grieve and Corelli to have big games to be in a position to get the upset against an opponent as good as Utah. Unfortunately, didn't get it. 20 digs from Kate Georgias is impressive. Unfortunately, 20 digs in a losing effort.
Yeah, you actually kind of look at the stats on this one. Cougs actually out-hit Utah in the first set, and then Utah hits a whopping 0%, but the Cougs hit negative 0.29. So you had some opportunities there to really kind of take advantage and come out ahead and maybe win some of these sets when Utah wasn't playing their best. The big problem here is, or not big problem, the big takeaway from this game and the one we're about to talk about is it's just pretty typical of how this season has looked. You've played some good teams close, and you just haven't been able to get across the finish line.
Yeah, like I said at the top, similar story against BYU. In the other game from the past week, wasn't a bad effort by U of H, but BYU came out on fire in the first set. U of H would subsequently lose 2 very close sets to lose 3-0. Like the Utah match, a good percentage of why you lost, I think, was just being the second best team at the net, maybe playing a fractionally less clean game than your opponent over those final 2 sets as well. I singled her out maybe somewhat negatively in the last match. So I will note Angela Grieve did give you a double-double, 10 kills while hitting 296, and also gave you 11 digs. BYU hit 340 as a team for the match. I mean, hard to win against an opponent doing that well offensively at the risk of giving reductive analysis. These are going to be 2 very, very tough matches. This team just isn't there right now. I think they could eventually get there, but it's a cycle, man. Like you see what you want to build towards, and unfortunately you're not there yet.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. You're again, you out-hit a team in the second set. Houston hits 236. BYU hits 233. Not a huge difference there, but a difference nonetheless. And you just can't close the door, or you can't quite get across the finish line. You kind of look at it here and you go, you took them into extra points, I guess you could say,
yeah.
And didn't come out on top. It kind of sucks, but sometimes when you're playing, when your season looks like this, it just kind of happens.
It really makes that Texas Tech loss a couple Saturdays ago extra painful, because you could look at the schedule and know who's there and be like, okay, like that's your last winnable one for a little bit here. Like, it's going to be very, very tough. You're going to have to pull a pretty big upset to get the win, and just not banking that one, losing 3-0 to a Tech team that's not nearly on the level of these two, I think just makes that one stick in your craw a little bit. Up next, the absolutely brutal part of the schedule gets more absolutely brutal, if at all possible. You're going to TCU tomorrow night, Baylor on Saturday afternoon, which you said you will be out for. Excited for you to at least see the Cougs in person. Lost close-ish ones to these teams previously at home. You lost a heartbreaking 5-setter to TCU in early October, and then a few weeks ago lost a 4-setter that was pretty close to Baylor, where you just kind of just didn't have everything they did. So excited you at least get to see the Cougars in person. Wait, are you going to the game in Fort Worth or the game in Waco?
The game in Fort Worth.
Okay, I just thought about that. I was like, wait a minute, that one makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. I'm going to the game in Fort Worth. The one in Waco last year was actually the day before Thanksgiving, and I went down to it last year.
That's right. They still play at the Farrell Center, or at least were back then, right?
Yes, last year. But that was also before the new stadium opened up. Even so,
That's so they play at Pavilion. They play at Foster Pavilion. Where
I think so. I'm not 100% sure.
Gotcha. Cougar women's basketball. Bobby, we have to talk about Cougar women's basketball. I have no easy transition.
Yep, it exists.
And we got to talk about it. You lost 60-48 to Rice and subsequently scored one of the more hollower wins you'll ever see a Cougar team get over HBU 54-52 on Sunday.
HBU? What? I'm sorry, HBU.
HBU, that's their name.
I don't see that on our schedule.
Look, just because they want to make themselves sound like more inclusive, I'm fully past the age where I just acknowledge things of like what they are. Like, even though I'm gonna call A&M Commerce like East Texas A&M, things like that, various prankery. I will be cold and buried in the ground.
UTRGV will be Texas Pan American.
I actually kind of like UTRGV.
Me too.
Look at my inconsistency. No, I mean lost to the school on Fondren in Southwest, or beat the school on Fondren in Southwest Houston, but it almost, to an extent that it almost felt like a loss. Bobby, where do you want to start?
Yeah, I watched both of these games because I hate myself. But I didn't watch all of them, to be fair. I watched most of the Rice game. You can't put the ball in the bucket. I mean, that's like part of the game, right? Like you have to be able to score points. The HBU HCU loss or win comes.
We both had a Freudian slip and called it a loss. That's something.
Yeah. You get that win on a foul with 3 seconds left to go in the game. And you make both free throws. Actually, HCU has a chance to go up late in the game where the Cougs are going to have to go down and get a bucket and kind of beat the buzzer. They miss both of those free throws or they make one, miss the other to tie it up. Cougs go down and are able to run an offensive set that ends up with a foul, and the Cougs go to the line and get the win. It wasn't pretty. I think if this were a different opponent, you're like, hey, a 1-point win's a 1-point win. I am not happy with a 2-point win versus HCU.
I'll rewind a little bit and talk about the Rice game as well. I realize Rice is a team coming off making the most recent NCAA tournament, who's looked better than U of H, I think, on the balance of the short season we had so far, but I think I was disappointed how uncompetitive that one was. Layla Blair is back. Definitely still looked like a player.
It never felt close.
Never felt
12
close.
Doesn't feel like a big enough margin.
I had my notes. They got a 9-point lead after the first quarter and just basically kept U of H at arm's length for the rest of the game.
Yep.
Only thing worth positive talking about, 21 points on 7 of 14 from Gigi Cook, a career high for her. I think I've said it before. I think Cook and Kiara Merchant are promising young guards who are certainly being asked to do more than they're ready to at this point in their respective careers. This is your worst loss to Rice women's basketball since the 2012 Conference USA tournament. I know it's not a team you play annually, but it's a team you play semi-regularly, and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good even if it's not a surprising loss to a Rice team that's been better than you, and more years than not been better than you generally in the sport. I guess for the HBU game, I'm happy with the players and coaching staff getting to experience a win, but beating that team in any sport by this tight of a margin is going to be unsatisfying. And
Sam,
I
don't want to necessarily get anyone to freak out here, but this HBU-HCU team lost to TCU and Tech by like 20 points each. Not great. Not great.
It's a good data point to compare yourself to the rest of the conference with, and not surprisingly, you look much worse than the rest of the conference.
Yep.
You were down 16-12 after the first quarter. You were up by 2 at halftime. This was a tie game. until Leilani Ogman, which mentioned, made those 2 free throws with 2 seconds left. This game almost went to overtime. And then there are a lot of red flags about this early season. I don't think any of them redder, though, than scoring 54 points and making 35% of your shots against one of the weaker teams you're going to see in the entire season. I'll challenge myself to say one positive thing about this game, which I think is kind of reflective of the season so far. This team actually does seem to be better at making free throws than the previous several U of H teams.
Yeah.
It's about the only thing we're doing good at, putting the ball in the basket. You forced 17 turnovers, but we're only +2 in points off turnovers, which tells you how poorly things are going in the offensive end. You are going to be back in action at the Fertitta Center 2 times in the coming week. Alcorn State first, probably going to be a Cougar win. UNT, definitely not in the probably going to be a Cougar win category. I'm not going to make everything a referendum on U of H's head coaching situation. I'm just going to say that UNT head coach Jason Burton would be high on my short list of candidates if or when U of H makes a change in the current season. He's a young Texan coach, turned A&M Commerce into a D2 power, helped them transition to D1, did drastically better than their preseason projections last year. His first year at North Texas, they tied for the best record in the league, went to the WBI. Hard to kind of say exactly what they are in the current season. They won their 2 SWAC home games to start the year. They lost pretty badly on the road to a top 25 Oregon team. No shame there. And then won by 11 over Abilene Christian last Saturday. Really challenging assignment in the low post. Tamisha Lampkin, a senior post player, returning first team all conference selection, averaging 15.5 points and 11 boards per game. They have 5 players averaging at least 8.8 points per game. A deeper, more balanced team than the Cougars probably doesn't bode well. The Cougars getting a win on Sunday.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough week. I never thought I'd hear that about Alcorn State and UNT.
At least the UNT part. All right, buddy. I think we covered everything. Let's take us home.
All right. Well, if you have listened this far, thank you very much. We do appreciate you. And if you want to find us and provide us some feedback, you can actually find us on Twitter. The former co-host and my current co-host have gone over to B Sky, Blue Sky, whatever it's called. I am over there as well, but we will occasionally still check the Twitter account. You'll probably see some stuff that's going to be a great place for you to still see our stuff. But if you want to give us feedback, head over to Blue Sky or send us an email, podcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We always appreciate the feedback. If you want to throw a couple of bucks at us, we appreciate that as well. We talked about it earlier, that very little of the money actually goes to us, and it goes to hosting this and making sure that we have good video and equipment and stuff like that for you guys to have a great podcast. We're not getting rich off this at all, but if you want to throw a couple of bucks at us for the hours of research that it takes us to actually do this podcast, please visit us at patreon.com/SH podcast. Minimum $5 a month to get all of our premium content. If you want to throw more at us, we will gladly take it. We appreciate everything that you guys do. And as always, Sam, what do we say?
Go Cougs, baby.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!